number one, you got to take action. I see a lot of investors or people that want to get into real estate. They'll talk about it and they'll educate themselves, and they never take the leap. And it's kind of like having kids. You're never going to be ready, 100% ready to be a parent.
I can understand that metaphor.
You're never going to be 100% ready for real estate either, or assisted living or whatever niche you get into. But I think it's important to pick a niche. I kind of bounced around a little bit. We were doing the multifamily stuff. When we pivoted to senior living, then that's all we were doing for a while.
So today's podcast, I have a great guest to share his story about how he transitioned from his non-real estate W-2 job and then turned into a full-time real estate investor and entrepreneur. And he went through various real estate investing strategies while he was finding out what worked for him, what was his niche to provide for him and his family. And we're going to talk about his story and then talk about how he ended up focusing on senior living. And we'll dive into some details about how those deals operate and also the macro landscape. Mitch Conrad, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
So a lot of people of our listeners and viewers might recognize your name from the various annual books we've published every year. I think you've been in almost all of them. I don't know if you're the first one.
all but the first.
I think all but the first. And I've always enjoyed reading your story from, afar. And then, we talk here and there at an event. And every year it's just been so fascinating to kind of just see how you have scaled your business, because you have scaled it tremendously. I think you said you're up to 23 senior locations with over 400 senior residents, close to 300 employees. Mm-hmm. I might be butchering some of those numbers, but I hope our audience gets to realize it's big. But I want to rewind it because you were a high school teacher here in Metro Denver. So tell us where you were and how you got into real estate.
Sure. Well, like you said, I was a teacher at local high schools here in Arvada. And I got into home ownership, and I was really surprised at the appreciation that I got in my house when I sold it. And it really turned me on to real estate, because I was like, I can't earn this kind of money as a teacher and coach that I just earned doing nothing with real estate. So that's what really opened my eyes to real estate to start with. And so then I just started exploring and trying to do some things with real estate.
So once you had that light bulb moment from, selling your house and seeing the appreciation gain, what was your first real estate investment as an investor?
Well, I tried to make it my first house. I tried to keep my first house once I knew it had that value, but the bank would not allow me to do that because I actually house hacked before it was the term. I had a roommate living in the basement so I could afford the house. And then knowing what I know today, I think I probably could have kept the house, because you can use 75% of the rents, but apparently my mortgage lender didn't know that. So I sold that house. So my first dabble in it was I bought a triplex in Aurora. I was looking to just flip a house over the summer, kind of as a summer job as a teacher, looking for some extra money. And I kind of accidentally fell into long-term hold and with the small multifamily.
Just like the flip wasn't working out, or just as you got into it, the numbers look different? What's kind of the story behind there? Because we...
It actually went really well. And when my real estate agent came in and looked at the place, he said, "Oh, this is great. We can sell it for X." But I started doing the math and I was like, I just moved in 3 new tenants at new rent rates, and I started calculating what I could make monthly. And I was like, I'll make as much monthly if I hold it for, I don't remember exactly how long, but like a year and a half or 2 years, I'd make the same amount as if I sell it right now, but I'd still have the asset.
So you had strong cash flow.
Yes. Yeah. So North Aurora is really good cash flow. Yeah. So I just told my agent, I said, I'm going to give this a shot. I may be calling you in 3 months and want to get out of it, but I'm going to give this landlording thing a try.
Okay. And I take it worked out pretty well for you. And then how did you progress from there? Because I know you've done some multifamily investing. You've done some fix and flips. What was your story that eventually led you to senior living?
Well, like you said, I did several different things. Actually ended up buying the triplex right next door about a year and a half or two later. It came up for sale. It was back in the day when you just looked in the newspaper, and I found one for sale there and put in an offer and got it. And then I bought a fourplex. I bought it in Arvada thinking, oh, let's get closer to home. So that worked well. Then I tried a couple flips. That did okay. And then then I thought Denver was kind of getting overpriced at that point. So I thought maybe it's time to look outside.
What year was this?
So this would have been about 2002, 2003.
Okay. So we had a little more runway since then, huh?
Yeah. And so I ended up buying, and I didn't have a lot of capital. So I'm playing this game of I'd fix up the house. I was basically doing the burr, but I didn't refi the whole thing. I just take out a HELOC. And so I bought the first property by taking a HELOC on my personal house. And then after I bought the first triplex, I took out a HELOC on that to buy the next one. And I just kind of kept snowballing with HELOCs. Then I kind of combined them all together and bought a 26 unit apartment complex in Phoenix. I just felt like Phoenix was, the market wasn't going crazy like it was in Denver. So I took a leap. I'm kind of surprised I did it at this point, but went down there and found a 26 unit and ended up turning around and selling it 2 years later because Phoenix did take off. And of course, we forced the appreciation some. We were fixing units as people moved out, and so we made improvements, but I think in a matter of 2 years, we sold it for $800,000 more than what I purchased it for.
Oh, wow. So you took some chips off the table.
Yep.
So one of the things that we were talking about before the podcast is, one of your piece of advice is the riches are in the niches. Pick a niche and become an expert. Where in your investing journey did you realize that?
Well, I thought I was going to be expert in multifamily, and that's what I was building toward. After we sold that property in Phoenix, I thought, everything we touch turns to gold with real estate. So I was just going to keep doubling down on that. I actually bought another house for myself, a much larger house. I bought a boat, I bought a travel trailer. So we kind of used a lot of the funds that we made there, but I still had enough to reinvest. And I bought a 16 unit in Houston. That one didn't go as well. We actually had a fire and it burned down a good chunk of the building. There were actually two buildings with a catwalk in between. Fire happened to be right by the catwalk between the two buildings. So it went across the other side, burned down some of the other building as well. Water damage when the fire department came. I ended up with 4 tenants left after they were either displaced because of the water damage or the fire. And then the downturn came. And so we ended up just kind of riding it out. And I think I sold that about 2014. The prices came back and I was able to sell it and maybe made a couple nickels off of that is all. But at that point, we made a pivot. And that's the time that my wife's father, my father-in-law, had a stroke. And we started looking at options for that. And we just didn't see too many great options. And then I went to...
when you say options, you mean for getting him into
yes.
A senior care facility?
Right, yep. We were just kind of checking out. We weren't sure if he was going to need it or not. And it just so happened that I went to a RIA meeting and it was... The speaker was talking about converting single family homes into a group home for seniors. And I was like, that is perfect. Except it's very regulated. And I didn't really want to deal with the regulations. I like the idea of converting a house. We had done flips and other things. So I went to my wife and I asked her if she'd be interested in that. And she basically said, yes, I would love to do that. And she was a teacher also in the schools. And she had actually become an administrator. So she was kind of familiar with working with government and red tape and so forth. So we decided that was going to be our pivot. We thought we'd buy one and then maybe expand to 3 to have a little economy of scale was our original plan.
Okay. So did your father-in-law end up moving into your first investment, or did that just spark the idea and he found he was somewhere else?
Yeah, he actually did. He came back from the stroke and actually was doing pretty well, but then literally, I don't remember the time frame exact, less than a year after that, he got cancer and really was going downhill quickly. The family wanted to keep him at home, which is very common. And so the kids had to each start taking 24-hour shifts at home because my mother-in-law wasn't able to help him enough, so she needed assistance. But it was really quite a drag on the family. And finally, they were like, okay, let's give this a try. And so we moved him into the first place that we had done in preparation for him. And it was the best move for the family. They were just, all of a sudden, all the responsibility went away because they didn't have to care for him anymore. They could actually just spend time with him when they came to visit.
And enjoy the time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so he did spend his last days he did pass away in our home peacefully. And so it was really a blessing how it all came to be that we had that house for him. Made it very easy transition.
Well, that's a powerful story. And I'm glad that, worked out with sparking your guys' investing idea. And also it sounded like it worked out very well for the family.
Yep.
So going back to the real estate, so bought the first house with the plan to get 2 more.
Mm-hmm.
And I assume you achieved the 1 to 3 scale.
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously you didn't stop. So what happened?
Well, before we were even done with the first house, which, by the way, it was an 11-month process. We thought it'd take 6 months, but it took us 11 months to even get it open. You just go into something new. You just don't know all the details.
Could you walk us through the process? Because I'm sure some of it has changed, but I'm sure the fundamentals of that. I know there's like physical improvements, but as you mentioned actually for the podcast, there's a lot of regulatory hurdles as well.
Yes. So the main things you have to do are like you widen all the doors to all the bedrooms, well, all of the doors, because they might have wheelchairs. So you widen them all to 36-inch doors. You take down all the thresholds, any tripping hazards, so any transitions from one room to the other, you got to make sure there's very little tripping hazard there. Even the front doors, you got to work with the tripping hazards. You have to put in a sprinkler system, a fire suppression sprinkler system. So there's a lot of plumbing involved with that. An alarm system, because the alarm goes straight to the fire department. So they come out right away. So even though it's a residential situation, it's got a lot of commercial aspects to it as well.
Did you have to install wheelchair ramps and meet some like ADA compliance as well?
You would have to in those situations. And in fact, yeah, that's another thing we did. There were some front steps coming in. So we took the front steps out and it was just steep enough that we were able to put a ramp going up I didn't have to do one of those sideways ones where you kind of wrap around. We were able to do just a straight shot in. So it looks a little less institutional that way. Yeah. It looks more natural. But yeah, that is part of it.
Was this like a ranch style, or was this okay? So if it's a split level 2-story, it sounds like those aren't ideal for senior living for those reasons.
That would not be a good option. Yeah, okay. It was a ranch. It was a walkout basement, and with that we put in an elevator. So it actually does have an elevator to get to the bottom, which is a little unusual. We don't have very many elevators especially in the residential homes that we have. But it had a very large open space. This was not just your typical ranch. It was a 6,000 square foot ranch.
Oh, wow.
About 3,000 upstairs and 3,000 downstairs. So we took a house that I believe had 4 beds and 5 baths to 11 bedrooms and 10 bathrooms. So virtually every room has its own private full bathroom with a shower.
And then can you talk more about just like other regulatory requirements and then, what you have to do to actually bring in residents?
So yeah, before you have to get a license with the state through CDPHE. So they will come in and do an inspection.
CDPH, what department is that? Colorado
Department of, let's see.
Something health?
Yeah, health is in there, yes.
That's like me asking about what DORA stands for. Okay, but it's basically Colorado Health Department.
Right, yes.
They're the ones that are going to govern and regulate and license senior care facilities.
Correct,
okay.
Yeah. I think it's the Public Department of Health, kind of a thing. So yeah, so they will come in and do an inspection, which, again, we didn't know what we didn't know. You research as much as you can, and we didn't know what to expect on our first inspection. So in that situation, we thought we were ready for our inspection. So you put it in, and then you just sit and wait and wait and wait. And they came out about a month after we put in our request. So we've learned since then to submit earlier, take that chance. And they came out and they found just a few items here and there that they said would not work. For example, in the backyard, there's some landscaping. They said we need to put in a fence over the landscaping because potentially they could fall down that landscaping. So then I said, well, what kind of fence do I have to? I don't want to put up something like a picket fence. Could I make it like a split rail so it's, you can still see the whole yard? It was really beautiful. And the inspector thought for a minute and was like, no, I don't think that would work. And I'm like, well, it was so strange because it was like, it felt like she was just making up the rules as she's going. And I said, well, how high does it have to be? And she's like, I said, could it be maybe 3-4 feet? And she's like, no, because they could probably fall over that too. I'm like, so 6 feet? Yeah, 6 feet would work. So I wasn't getting anywhere with that. So I finally put in a fence, an aluminum one that you can see through. It's got the small slats with spaces between, so we could still see through. And we didn't know if it was going to pass or not. And
so there was no regulatory, here's the guidelines for a fence has to be.
Nope.
Wow.
No. Another one, she literally walked into the bathrooms that we had done, full tile, beautiful. She turned on the water to the shower head and took off her shoe. So she had her bare foot, rubbed her big toe in the water, and then brought it to the tile. And she said, this one's too slippery. It's like, okay.
That was the official test?
Yes. And I was like, okay, well, what do I do about that? She goes, I don't know. I'm like, so what are my options? And she wouldn't give me anything. I'm like, so I have to rip it out and put new tile in? And she goes, well, that would fix the problem. I said, I got nowhere. So we did more research on it, and there actually are grades. There's a value on tile of how slippery it is. I didn't even realize that. So I think maybe 3 of our tiles she failed.
And all just with her big toe test?
Yes, yeah. Okay. So she didn't even know what the rating was for the tile, but she just felt it and said, oh, they could slip on this one. So we ended up getting some.
Now, is it the same tile in all the bathrooms?
No.
Okay.
My wife was very adamant about this, so we wanted it to feel like a home and not an institution. So every bathroom was different lighting, different tile, different patterns, so that they have a unique room compared to the other rooms in the house. So 3 of them fail. We found this stuff that you can put on just with a roller. It's almost like paint, and it just gives a little tackiness to it.
Yeah. Crossed
our fingers, and when they came out to reinspect, that passed. I think there was another one of the thresholds at one of the side doors to go outside. She said the threshold was too high. So you had to step over. She said, it's too much of a tripping hazard. So I'm like, asked again what options I have. She was no help. So we found, actually my wife did some research online and found this real heavy rubber. It's like really heavy tires almost. And it's just a ramp. And then we would just cut it off at the height we needed, slid it up there, and it's heavy enough that it doesn't slide. Again, crossed our fingers that would help us pass. And it did.
So, looking forward to all the other projects you've done, is that how most of the inspections were? Were they very casual and not tightly, or was she more unique in her?
Every inspector, what we found is every inspector is different and they look for different things, and you don't know what inspector you're getting, but we've done enough now. My wife knows, well, unless they're new, she pretty much knows them all, because then they come out and have to, part of the regulations is they have to re-inspect every year. At least once a year you get re-inspected. So she gets to know the regulators fairly well, and she knows what their buttons are of the things that they look for. But yeah, it's gotten better over the years. We've been doing this for 8 years now. And the good news is it was only this first one that we weren't able to pass on the first try.
Okay. So
we figured out a lot. Now on our second and third ones, we were ready. Like in fact, I was positioned at Home Depot, and they said I went to Home Depot to get something. Because in one of them they wanted these strips put down in the showers to, instead of, it wasn't too slippery, but they wanted the strips. So I went to Home Depot, I'm grabbing the strips. While I'm there, my wife calls me, while you're there, grab another fire extinguisher. And it's like, so as long as you can get those things done before they leave.
Oh, this was during the inspection?
Yes, during the inspection. And so we learned more on the next one. And now since then, we haven't needed to be that crafty.
So you were there, rushed back home, installed, and said, hey, come back through.
Yep, exactly. Because
that's brilliant. I love the hustle.
The problem is they take a month again to come out and re-inspect.
So a month to feel see the fire extinguisher and get the grippy strips in the...
Right.
Okay.
So we didn't want to lose another month, especially on that first project. I did it all with hard money because that's what I knew was hard money. So, and it was a big project, a big construction project. So it's eaten pretty fast into our funds. So that was huge. So, we've learned, and now we don't have that trouble.
So taking a step back to like the macro view, can you kind of just talk about how you scaled, the investing in the business, because there's the funding and renovating the piece of real estate, but also this is a very heavy business operations business. And from what it sounds like, I think you're more on the real estate deal making side, and your wife is more on the business operations side. Yes, right?
Correct.
That's a really cool partnership.
Yeah. So
how did you guys scale that? Because that's a very unique niche.
Yes. Well, the real estate side is very familiar with what we were doing. So that wasn't a big stretch. I already had, like I said, my hard money lender was willing to work with me. They took a little chance on us. It was a large project for them as well, and longer than what they normally prefer, but it worked out. My wife, though, she dug in and had to learn all these regulations. She's coming from education, not from healthcare. So there's a big learning curve for her. But yeah, I guess as being a mother, she dealt with a lot of things with our kids, that I didn't. And so she picked it up very quickly. And of course, she was very good with people. And I think that's a lot of it is, you just have to be able to calm people. And I guess as an assistant principal, she was dealing with conflicts there. So she was pretty good at that as well, I think. And then she's a good leader because we're providing 24-hour care. So we have shifts come in. Most of our places, we do 3 8-hour shifts every day. So you have 3 changeovers, and then working out your systems for those changeovers and passing things off. And of course, the medication management is a huge thing. So she
Do you
learned.
have to have your DA license for dispensing? Because I imagine there's some pain meds in there.
Right.
So is there, I mean,
so
I know there's high regulation around
yes, it's
writing those scripts and also dispensing them to clients.
Now we don't write any scripts.
Yeah.
So that's skilled nursing at that level. So we're just assisted living. We have memory care also, and we have a little independent living. But yeah, we do not, all we do is follow the medication prescriptions. And so we just follow that. Some of them are PRN, which is as needed. So if the resident asks for it, then we can prescribe those types. So it's called a QMAP designation.
QMAP designation.
Yeah. So again, I may not know. It's qualified medical. Something.
Yeah. We'll bring in your wife next time. But they're able to then, I guess, securely store them and then log as they're dispensed. Is that
correct?
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, my wife's in the veterinarian world, so she tells me the stuff they have to go through for their management.
Yep.
And so it's just been, I mean, fascinating. I'm also just like, that sounds like a gigantic headache to me.
It is, and especially if there's narcotics involved, you have to do medication counts to make sure none of the narcotics are gone at every shift change. So it's there's a lot to it going on behind the scenes that nobody would ever realize the accountability that's there.
And it sounds like all the staff is in-house employees with you and your wife. Is that common, or do a lot of people end up like outsourcing that to their companies, or is there? I imagine there's different options.
Yeah, I think in the residential sector, it's more common to have a nurse running it, or the owner. Like that's how we do it. You know, my wife running it as the administrator. The position is the administrator. And so that's what my wife does. She's the administrator. But when you get to larger facilities and such, then it's more common to have a management company come in and run things for you.
And that'll be like an outside type management company?
Yes, right.
Okay. So I might be getting these numbers wrong, but I think before we started recording here, you're now at 23 Colorado locations.
Correct.
And just recently you started expanding out of state. And also, as you did, like you're leveling up and going to like residential to bigger commercial facilities, right? So out of state and commercial facilities. Can you talk about this next round of scale up that you're going through?
Okay. So, I say it's a lot like going from single family to multifamily. In that world, it's just for scaling purposes, it's actually about the same amount of work to open a house as it is to open a commercial community. So you just have more people involved, but you're using the same systems. So just for scale, we're moving that direction. Now, there's pros and cons both ways, because some people love the smaller environment, and while others, the residents, love the larger environment where there's lots more options and amenities typically.
And I remember you either saying or reading in the book that during the COVID pandemic that, I mean, we all heard the horror stories of, what's happening in senior care facilities, that since you were smaller and residential, if I recall correctly, you guys weathered the storm and your residents weathered the storm much better than the bigger facilities, right?
Absolutely. We had most of our homes never got COVID at all. It did get into a couple, but in the smaller environments, you're able to control how many people are coming in and out. So it's a percentage game, and we were just careful with it. And not very many of our seniors got COVID.
Well, congratulations to that.
Yeah.
I'm sure their families are very appreciative of that.
Yes.
So I love how you talk about scale, because I've had so many real estate investors talking about the same thing. Hey, to do a 100-unit apartment building, same work to do a 5-unit. Now, someone's starting out saying, hey, I love this niche. They've got passion for it. They want to become an expert in there. They want to do it. Do you think, hey, do you start out going for the bigger facilities, or is it, hey, you start small, you learn the skills, you set up the systems, and then go big? So do you start small to go big, or you start off by going big? If you could rewind the clock, what, about 10 years ago to Mitch back then, what would you advise younger Mitch to do?
I think the biggest thing is the capital needed. It's easier to do a smaller home because you need less capital.
Okay.
Whereas if you're going to do a large commercial, that's like buying a large commercial apartment building. If you've got the ability to do the capital, and then you can hire the staff that know the things that you don't know, I think that works. But if you're like most people, you don't have that ability, then it makes sense. Your only option then is to start, I think, with the residentials.
Okay. All right. So as we wrap up here, are there any like general tips that you would give to just real estate investors in general who are either wanting to transition out of their non-real estate career into real estate, or in their scale up journey as an investor?
Well, I think the thing is, number one, you got to take action. I see a lot of investors or people that want to get into real estate. They'll talk about it and they'll educate themselves, and they never take the leap. And so that's probably the first thing. And it's kind of like having kids. You're never going to be ready, 100% ready to be a parent.
I can understand that metaphor.
You're never going to be 100% ready for real estate either, or assisted living, or whatever niche you get into. But I think it's important to pick a niche. I kind of bounced around a little bit. We were doing the multifamily stuff. And when we did the conversion, when we pivoted to senior living, then that's all we were doing for a while. And so I think that's probably the next thing, is kind of become an expert in what niche you do. I like saying that we have an unfair advantage. Now that we've gone through and we've learned all these things, we know we can look at a property and know very quickly if it's going to work for us. And we know what the regulations are going to do most of the time. Of course, they change on us sometimes, so we get caught still. But become an expert in what you're doing and learn, and then apply that to your next ones. And so it's like a snowball. I think real estate starts slowly. It's not a get rich quick scheme. You put in your time, but it starts to really ramp up. And and mine did that even with just multifamily. I started with small multis, and then I went to larger multis. And I was getting that ball going. And then when we pivoted, started with the small ones. And then we started, instead of just going singles at a time, then we started getting groups. We overtook a company. One of them had 4, another one had 11. And so we just started growing at a faster pace. So just think of it in those terms. Don't be in a rush when you're starting. Get yourself grounded, and then expect it to ramp up.
Great advice, Mitch. Well, thank you so much for coming out. And I think there might be some people connect with you or you and your wife potentially, either to talk real estate, learn deals, invest in deals, whatever it is. And also there might be some listeners out there where their parents are, potentially in that phase, we're looking for senior care. What's the best way for people to connect with you and your team?
Well, probably I would give them my email.
Okay.
So it's just Mitch, MITCH, at gardens, with an S, care.com.
Mitch at gardenscare.com. And of course, we'll put in the show notes. And for some reason, listeners can never find it, hit me up and I will gladly forward your email on to Mitch. Well, Mitch, thank you. And this was packed full of information. And viewers out there, hopefully you got a couple nuggets out of there. And then make sure you follow Mitch's journey in our annual Colorado Real Estate Investing Guide. He's been one of the few people who's written every single year, and it's just been fun to watch and be part of his journey. So I encourage people to follow along that way, and also, of course, write your own chapter. Mitch, thank you so much.
All right. Thanks for having me.